I stand on the shoulders of many who have come before me. So it's an honor to be able to share my background experiences from being an African American woman growing up in the South and sharing differences that our students would never imagine. And sometimes as I'm sharing stories, they don't. They're like, you're not telling us the truth. And I'm like, yes, I am. Just being able to help them to move forward and be critical thinkers and just embrace 21st century education and the challenges that we face and look at what they're going to be doing as teachers and how they can impact the lives of children.
Welcome to the Power of PennWest. I'm your host, Dr. John Anderson, president of PennWest University. Whether you're a current student, a proud alum, or just curious about the PennWest community, welcome. Please stay tuned as we explore the stories, achievements, and experiences of the people who bring life to our campuses in California, Clarion, Edinburgh, and online. Welcome to the Power of PennWest podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Power of PennWest podcast, where we celebrate the unique identities of the people who make up our campuses. This month, we're honoring Black History Month with a special episode that explores the personal and professional journeys of three remarkable individuals at PennWest. We'll dig into the meaning of the Black History Month through the lenses of our Frederick Douglass Institute director, one of our basketball coaches, and a current graduate student, each of whom will examine their inspiring stories, challenges they've overcome, and legacies they're building. Today we welcome Dr. Michelle Torregano, who was recently selected to lead PennWest's efforts in the Frederick Douglass Institute, Coach Damian Pitts, the head coach of Clarion's men's basketball team, and graduate student Bria Allen, who's an outstanding photographer and an MBA student at PennWest. Welcome everyone to the Power of PennWest podcast. It's great to have you here. And I look forward to this conversation. I had a chance to talk with each of you at different occasions on campus, and this is a chance for the whole community to get to know you a little bit better. And we have a chance to talk about, as we do often on the podcast, your history, where you came from, what brought you here to PennWest, what that experience has been like for you. And I'm really anxious to get started. Coach Pitts, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit about your background, where you're from, how you ended up here coaching the Clarion men's basketball team?
Certainly. I'm originally from Maryland, so I was born and raised right outside of Washington, D.C. I went to a college in Towson, Maryland, Goucher College. That's where I graduated from my undergrad. And I played basketball while I was there. And, we had a lot of success, nationally ranked every year I was there except for one. I learned a lot about what sports could do for the individual. After I graduated from Goucher, I graduated with a history degree. And my plan was actually to become a professor. But my parents told me that the the funnel of money was drying up. And if I was going to get a higher degree, I would have to find a way to pay for it myself. So I actually sent my resume out for graduate assistant positions in basketball. I actually didn't really want to be a basketball coach at the time, but I felt like it could be a means to an end. So I wound up going to Millersville University as the graduate assistant basketball coach at Millersville. Again, thinking, I was going to get my master's degree, move on to PhD and become a professor. And the coaching side of it, I actually was kind of burnt out from basketball from my 4 years as a player. I didn't think that coaching would be something I want to do. But there was a situation with one of our players. He was a really big, hulking young man. He if you look at him, he looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, muscles all over the place, 6'7", super intimidating presence if you were to see him. Well, one day he took his uniform home and left it at home. He came back to practice the next day without his uniform. The head coach got mad and kicked him out of practice. So he leaves in a huff. The next day, I see him at the cafeteria. And I go up to try to talk to him, and it was really loud in the cafeteria. And I would try to get into his personal space just so he could hear me, but he kept backing up. And then I would move forward, and he kept backing up. Meanwhile, this is a person who could break me in half if he wanted to. But what I recognized in that moment was he was actually intimidated by me and in the authority of being a male, a Black male, in a level of authority, even though I was only the GA. And it intimidated him because he came from a single parent home, no father in the house, and he looked to all of us as pseudo father figures. And it was in that moment where my trajectory completely changed. And I recognized, oh, this is not just about basketball. I mean, it's about basketball, but basketball is the vehicle to help mentor young men like him through and negotiate all these things of what growing up is. And so it was that moment that I caught the coaching bug. And so I was a GA at Millersville. I wound up being the full-time assistant after a time. And then I moved on to become a head coach at Centenary University in New Jersey. And Clarion was always on my radar as a place to end up in my years at Millersville. And when the position came available, I jumped at the opportunity. So that's how I'm here currently.
Thank you, Coach Pitts. It's been so interesting as we've had lots of different people on the podcast. Almost everybody can go back to one event, one experience they had, one interaction with someone. And sometimes it's a mentor, sometimes it's somebody you're trying to mentor, that a light comes on, a new vision is opened up, a new direction just happens to present itself. I really appreciate you sharing that story. Let's next go to Dr. Torregano. It's great to see you again. Tell us a little bit and tell the whole community a little bit about your history. How did you end up here at PennWest?
I was actually recruited at the Southern Regional Educational Board Conference by Dr. Carol Sheffield and Dr. Lisa McBride, who were representing California University of Pennsylvania at the time. And they were recruiting for the Frederick Douglass Visiting Scholar for California University of Pennsylvania. We engaged in conversation. I had never heard of CalU prior to that. They took my resume, my vita, and we had conversation following that. It was quite interesting because when I went back to Penn State, which is where I was working on my doctorate at the time, I did some research and found out that CalU was a little small place in southwestern PA. I am originally from New Orleans, so I'm a Southern girl. And coming up to the Northeast to work on my doctorate was a culture shock to begin with. And then when I traveled for my interview at CalU, it was even a further shock to come to such a smaller place that I had no idea where I was going. And I'll never forget, as we were driving into town, Dr. Sheffield said, well, I'm going to drive you through town. And I'm still waiting and looking for traffic lights and, bustling town. And it's very, very small and very quaint. And so I'm like, well, where are the restaurants? And she's like, oh, there's a Dairy Queen over there. There's a Subway. And our students go to the quick fill for snacks. And I'm like, what am I getting myself into? But I met the faculty members and the folks on the search committee, and I did a teacher demonstration with students in the education department. And it was so much fun. It just felt really, really comfortable. I had an opportunity to meet Provost Jones at the time, who would later become president. And it was just a warm situation, and it felt like a good fit.
That's fantastic. What a great story of how to get here. And I've been to New Orleans a number of times, and this is certainly the opposite.
Most definitely.
That's great. Bria, tell us your story.
So I came to PennWest during the time of COVID. I graduated in 2020. When I was doing my search, I went to a predominantly white school. It wasn't really diverse where I was at. And I knew that the school that I went to, I wanted it to be diverse to where I can see all walks of life. So as I did my research, I looked up different clubs and organizations on CalU's campus. And I ended up finding the Black Student Union page, and that's where I saw different students and I saw the different events. And then I went and I saw HSA and ASA, all these different clubs, and I saw how welcoming the campus was. And then as soon as I came and did my tour, and I found out all the opportunities that I have and how I can get involved, that was the main thing that really drove me to Cal. And actually, fun fact, when I was little, I ran track and I had a track meet at CalU. And I think at the time I lost my race and I was like, I'm never coming to this school. I was like, I'm never coming here. It was just bad memories. But then as I got older, I went on my tour and I absolutely loved it. So that's how I ended up at Cal.
Well, we're glad you overlooked that one small little track meet and ended up here. Each of you have really unique roles on campus and have the ability to influence students. Let's have each of you talk about your role on campus, how you use that to build other students. And Bria, this relates to you too, because it's not just the faculty and staff that have influence on students. Some of the strongest influence we have are those peer influences. So, Coach Pitts, let's start with you. How do you see yourself as someone who influences others on campus?
Being the head men's basketball coach, obviously there's things kind of baked into that cake. But I've always seen the role of a head coach as more than just X's and O's and calling timeouts on the sideline. Being visible is important. And the mentorship piece, as I talked about before, is the main reason why I'm doing this. I learned through my years of coaching the difference in people. There's so many different people that you can come across in sports, and I feel like there's a responsibility there. If not only just your players, being in the greater community of athletics, you're supporting other teams as well. And I've had conversations with players from other teams who have struggled with certain things over the course of time. And not to say that I'm an expert at many things, but I do understand emotion. And I feel like emotion and understanding emotion is super important as a coach. And so understanding emotion and how people deal with certain things is something that I've experienced a lot throughout the course of my career. And I feel that that ability is necessary in the lives of young student athletes and students on campus. It's a difficult period of time in their lives, right? You're going from childhood to adulthood, and it's an accelerated course. And there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that people need. So I feel like my role, more so than just being a basketball coach, is that to mentor and help young people.
Thanks, Coach. And we've had the chance to have you and your team into the President's house here in Clarion. It was so enjoyable to watch you in a non-basketball environment, interacting with those young men and coaching them along and helping them learn how to function in life in ways they may not have seen in the past. I enjoyed that. So talk to me a little bit about when these statements you made about emotion, managing emotion, understanding emotion. When did your interest in emotion start?
It probably started when I was a graduate assistant at Millersville. So I came from an upper middle class household. And so that was my perspective up until that point. Most of the people I knew were people who were like me. And so you talk about the racial component, but there's a class component too. And so I discovered that, and some of the issues that arise from people who didn't have two parents in the household, or the structure that I had growing up, the support structure, and the repression of emotion from many people. What I found is, especially for young men, the easiest emotion for young men to emote is anger, because it hides vulnerability. What I try to do is, for people that I obviously have a relationship with, is get them in a vulnerable state. And once you get them in a vulnerable state, you learn more about the issues, how you can best help them. And that honestly is the part of the job which is frustrating at times, but I feel like the most important part. Like you have to be able to emote what you're feeling, but also have a level of control over yourself as you're doing it. And that's a very difficult thing for young men.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That's great insight. Let's next go to you, Dr. Torregano. Talk to us a little bit about your role on campus, the Frederick Douglass Institute, and what that does as part of PennWest.
I have multiple roles on campus. First and foremost, I am honored to be the director of the Frederick Douglass Institute. I've come full circle from being a visiting scholar in 2010-2011 academic year to actually leading the institute. So that is an opportunity where I see we can help our university to grow with bringing in diverse faculty members to engage and embrace some of the values that are listed in our strategic plan, where we want students to feel welcomed, included, and address all cultures, and just create an environment for all, a wonderful learning environment and learning opportunity for everyone. So that affords me an opportunity to help students to see people who look like them from whatever background they may be coming from. But for me, in addition to leading the Institute, my primary role on campus is an educator, a faculty member in the Department of Education. So I get to engage with young people and prepare them to teach our future children. And it's the honor of my life. It's an opportunity where I feel like I get to mentor as well as learn from the students, and they challenge me every day. They challenge my thinking and they keep me on my toes. But it just embraces what we embody as a university. We want students to be able to have respectful dialogue, to engage in authentic conversations. So we look at this, and I look at the role as leading the Frederick Douglass Institute as a dovetail with what I do as a teacher and a faculty member, because we want to diversify and expand and broaden folks' imaginations, embed their thinking into critical research, being reflective and responsive leaders, and being able to engage in authentic dialogue. So that allows me to do that in both roles, working with my faculty colleagues and with students. I stand on the shoulders of many who have come before me. So it's an honor to be able to share my background experiences from being an African American woman growing up in the South, and sharing differences that our students would never imagine. And sometimes as I'm sharing stories, they don't, they're like, you're not telling us the truth. And I'm like, yes, I am. Just being able to help them to move forward and be critical thinkers and just embrace 21st century education and the challenges that we face here in higher ed, and look at what they're going to be doing as teachers and how they can impact the lives of children.
Thank you. One thing I've noticed about you, and I've seen you in many different settings on campus, is some people get that opportunity. They're a director, they're a professor, they're something, and they don't fully capitalize on it. But I've seen you lean into that role, lean into that leadership, and everywhere that I've seen you. And I'm so thankful to be associated with you and see that example of how you take those positions and those opportunities and your history. And you're not quiet about it. You're willing to share it, lean it, and let other people learn from that experience. And I think it's really a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important for our students to see us on campus and to have that visibility. And so I try to go into the Gold Rush and just sit and just chat. Sometimes I might see somebody who may have missed my class and can point a finger and say, well, you missed a good discussion today. I think that you were aware. I think that the panel was on the listening to the National Day for Racial Healing and heard our speaker, Leon Ford. And some of my students attended that forum, and it led into a very meaningful dialogue in class. So I like using the different activities that we have and making those connections, getting students out of their comfort zone and showing how these different pathways lead to what they're going to be doing as a teacher and how it's going to inform them in their future endeavors.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this message.
At PennWest University, we're making college make sense again for people who maybe thought college wasn't the answer. We're making college practical with programs tied to in-demand jobs that prepare you for success right away. We're making college accessible by breaking down barriers and offering more choices. We're making college approachable with faculty who understand where you're coming from and help you get where you're going. At PennWest, we're making college valuable again for people just like you. Learn more at pennwest.edu.
So, Dr. Torregano, and to each of you, sometimes it's easy to have easy conversations, and it's hard to have hard conversations. Some of those conversations are just what you talked about, some experiences that you may have had growing up in the South. I was meeting with the Lieutenant Governor's team last week and talking about gun violence and some of the ways that that is so challenging in some of our areas. I lost a very dear friend a few weeks ago, a man named Kyrie Thompson. He played football with my kids growing up and coached him when he was in Little League and those things. And he just died from gun violence in downtown Atlanta. So we've talked about Leon Ford and his talk that he gave on campus, which was so impressive that he was willing to share parts of his healing journey. I shared a little story about a close family friend that we lost. And I think there are lots of challenges that people have in our life that we need to talk through and open up and engage with. And that's how we can connect with people on a deeper level. But it takes difficult conversations, it takes uncomfortable conversations. How do you open the conversations about hard things? How do you open the conversations with people? Because it's easy to say, let's all work on this together and the future is bright. Those are the easy conversations. How do you really address challenging things and open conversations that way?
Thank you for asking that. I really appreciate that because that talk led to a challenging conversation.
Mhm.
One of the things that Leon said in his presentation was that it was important to have authentic conversations. So one of the courses I'm teaching right now is culturally responsive teaching in pre-kindergarten. And one of the strategies in order to move to cultural responsiveness is to be able to have an authentic conversation and to be able to step back out of your comfort zone and be able to just say what you think and put it on the table. So, and many times I say my class is Vegas. What goes on in the classroom stays in the classroom. The students have a sense of being in a safe space. And when we opened up the dialogue about what they thought about the presentation, I was surprised at their willingness to discuss and their honesty about how they felt like, first of all, they couldn't imagine a police officer shooting somebody. Then they couldn't imagine not hating the person because they were shot and going through the transformation from being anger, feeling anger and hate to a sense of healing. And what it happened was, in addition to just talking about the shooting, they started talking about other instances in their personal lives where they felt like they were marginalized or minimized. And it didn't just have to do with race. It had to do with other sections of their lives. Like there's a young man who is an education major. We need more men in the profession, but he says that, he acknowledged, he said, I feel like a minority in here. And then people look at me and say, well, why am I here? And it prompted some of the females to ask him further questions and delve into his feelings and what made him feel like he was a minority. The conversation stretched and broadened to a part beyond what my expectations were, far beyond where I thought that they would really, I thought that it was going to stay surface level, but it got really deep, it got emotional, so much so that the students they said, this is really a heavy conversation. But by the time we finished class, and usually they're looking and like, okay, it's time's up, let's go. They weren't rushing out of the door. And there were little small pods where they were still engaging in the conversation. So I'm looking forward to what happens tomorrow.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That presentation on that National Racial Day of Healing was so touching that he would be that vulnerable to talk about his experience and his path to healing. It was just a beautiful thing. And that reminds me, Coach Pitts, what you talked about earlier about getting to the point where people we're talking to feel comfortable with some level of vulnerability, that they're willing to open up a little bit and say, no, this is how I really feel about that. And sometimes those conversations are comfortable and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you hear things that you don't expect. So we talk about the challenging conversations in a way of mentoring and helping and lifting other people. It's important not just to deal with surface level things, but talk about real issues. Bria, tell us a little bit about your experience as a peer, as a mentor, as a friend. You were here as an undergraduate, now you're a graduate student. What has that experience been like for you?
It has been a wonderful experience. And going back to what you said about having difficult conversations, one of the key things that I really enjoyed doing being in a leadership role, as far as being a part of the Black Student Union Executive Board, is we were able to have those meetings where we can talk about serious things going on in the world or how our feelings are with being at a PWI or anything along those lines. So being able to create a safe space for students, like Dr. Torregano said, for them to come and fully express how they feel and talk about different issues in the world, but also build off of each other and see different perspectives as well as how we can take that information and go out into the world and, spread positivity and also create a safe space for people outside of those spaces.
Thank you very much, Bria. You said that so well. Well, this has been so fun to have each of you talk through a little about your history, your experience, your roles on campus. how you mentor, how you have easy and difficult conversations. Is there anything that you would like to share with the campus community about your role on campus or experiences you've had, Coach Pitts?
Yeah, I love the conversation about, tough conversations. Because in my profession, pretty much that's all there are is
Yeah.
tough conversations. And, there's conversations about people coming into your office, why am I not playing as much or I want a better role? And then there's real conversation. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a student athlete of mine who was a really good player, and he played a really, really bad game randomly. And we're trying to figure out why. Well, come to find out, his estranged father showed up at the game. And so bringing him in, having the conversation about, like, do you understand why you weren't emotionally centered? And even given all that, he didn't even really recognize that that was the reason why he was so off, because emotionally he was off. There's tons of examples over the course of years with stuff like that, but it is important to get through things that may seem uncomfortable. We have to relieve ourselves of, well, this is an uncomfortable situation, so I'm going to recess from it. As a mentor, I feel like it is my duty to engage in those kind of conversations because you can help people grow.
That's excellent. So well said. Thank you, Coach Pitts. And before we leave you, let's talk about emotion a little bit. How does it feel to have your team beat Gannon at Gannon? I think for the first time since like 1983 or something like that. Is that what I heard? Is that right?
Yes, yes. You have absolutely no idea. So I've been away from the team for a period of time, recovering from some things, and I've been forced to watch all the games on the live stream, and it's absolutely maddening. Absolutely maddening. I was in the hospital for a period of time, and watching one of the games, and the nurse came in and got mad at me because my heart rate was just going through the roof as I was watching the games. But super excited about the team. We're still a very young team. We have pretty much everyone returning, and also really happy for my assistant coaches who are gaining a lot of experience in areas where they didn't think they were going to have them. So super exciting.
That's great. We actually had some alum who played in the 80s when they beat Gannon at Gannon reach out after that game. Very excited about the progress of the team.
Nice.
Dr. Torregano, anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity. I was really surprised at the invitation. I don't think what I do is special. I do what I feel like I'm called to do. And working in higher education is my bliss. I have been an educator for all of my professional career. So I have taught in elementary school. I have worked as a school and district administrator, and I just enjoy working with the young people that we are preparing for our future. And I'm not just singling out education majors because I do engage with other students across the campus as well. And we have a wonderful community, and we have a wonderful group of people, faculty, staff, and administrators that are here for our students. And to piggyback on what Coach Pitts is saying, we can't just look at it as an education only, looking through it through a myopic lens. We have to look at the total child, the total person, and engaging in their mental health and supporting them emotionally and helping guide them to the resources that they need is so critical. And I just feel honored to be able to do that and to help create a total, holistic, valuable future citizen in our community.
Thank you very much. And I think that you said it so well. The better we get to know people, the more we know they are holistic, they are multidimensional, and everybody is unique. That's what makes our profession so rewarding, is we get to know people on so many different levels. Bria, let's finish up with you. And if you want to share any thoughts that you have, but I'd like to have you share some thoughts about how you have used your photography, which is something that you have a real passion about, to tell people stories from lots of different diverse backgrounds.
When I started taking pictures, it was more so a hobby and something where I can just be creative and create something fun. But as time went on, it more so I got to help me help others in a way. I always tell people that we're our biggest critiques. And of course, we're going to critique ourselves in a certain way. And a lot of us don't see each other how others see us. So being able to be that person and help you see how you see through somebody else's lens and them being able to express themselves in a more creative way, it has become so fun for me and one of the most happiest things that I get to do, but also just having fun with it and, being able to show others how we see themselves and how beautiful they are and how we're all different and we all have different things that makes us us. So being able to see that through my lens and create something beautiful out of it is what's enlightening for me.
What a great way to wrap this up. It has been so fun, Coach Pitts, Dr. Torregano, Bria, to have you here to talk about the ways in which we see other people and bring out the best in them and help them sort through very challenging times. I appreciate each of you being willing to share how you use that in your profession and in your role at PennWest. To all of you listening, we thank you for joining us for another episode of the Power of PennWest podcast.